Welcome back to today's video. Today I'm going to take you through a game played between Bobby Fischer and Mikhail. And Bobby Fischer and Mikhail, two of the most famous chess players of all time, two of the most very tactical players. They're not really known for their positional chess as much as they are for their insane tactics. And actually in this game there will be a queen sacrifice. So, we'll just keep watching and we'll get to it. Now it's Fischer versus Tal. Fischer with the white pieces, Tal with the black pieces, and the game starts with e4, c5, Sicilian defense. And actually, there's this famous clip on YouTube of one of the games that was played between Fischer and Tal, where Fischer basically condemned the Russians for only playing against e4. They would play c6, the Carcon. And actually, Tal trolled Fischer in one of their games they played together, where he just hovered his pawn over c6 and then pushed it to c5. And actually, Tal ended up winning that game, if I'm not mistaken. Now here, Fischer plays knight f3, pretty normal chess. Idea is simple, you want to be able to push your pawn to d4, supported by the knight, and have control of the e5 square as well. Here, Tal plays the old Sicilian, which you basically just put your knight on c6, with the ideas of protecting this and supporting this pawn that will try to take on d4. That's obviously protected 2 ways. Now here Fischer plays the move pawn to d4, Tal takes, knight takes, and here it's the Taimanov. So basically it's the open Sicilian. If you push your pawn to e6, you get the Taimanov Sicilian, named after Mark Taimanov, which I will make a separate video on if you want, just of his games and his life, because his life was pretty interesting once he lost to Fischer, to say the least. And here actually, Fischer played a strange move at the time. He played knight to c3. Now Fischer, when playing against a Taimanov, he never released a play knight to c3, so this is a very strange move from Fischer. But actually, modern computer play says that this is the best move. Or in fact, you can go knight to b5 if you want to, or even this move, bishop to f4, with just ideas of poking, and you can say, okay, well, you're going to push this pawn, but you take back, and then you just slide this back, something like that. But yeah. Now here, after knight c3, Tal plays queen to c7. Idea simple, want to get his queen just active a little bit, with ideas of pushing his pawn, maybe try to get his bishop out or fianchetto, and try to get a nice castling position. Here, Fischer, this is another strange move that actually I believe Tal in his post-game analysis said that he was surprised Fischer played this move. He actually chooses to fianchetto his bishop here. To put it, fianchetto on the bishop basically means you put it on the long diagonal of that square, which is usually on either the g2 square, b2 square, b7 square, or g7 square. Now here, it's very common to want to fianchetto your bishop, and Fischer's actually a big fan of this way that you play, where you basically fianchetto your bishop. He played this a lot in most of his games. He loved fianchettoing his bishop, and he actually was the person that basically invented the fact that bishops are actually worth half a point more than your knights. Now, obviously, computers will say they can be traded interchangeably, but the bishops are usually more helpful in the endgames. Knights are just trickier. Now here, knight to f6, knight d to b5, queen b8, bishop f4, pretty standard stuff, just developing your pieces. This move, putting pressure on the queen. So now you're going to have to block with a pawn move or knight, but knight would probably not be the best move. And in fact, it is not the best move. Now, if you want to take a second pause right here, why is knight e5 not the best move? I'll go over it. But here, instead, you should have gone pawn to e5, because now black simply has to play bishop to g5. And after something like a6, you play bishop takes f6, and then you play a takes, and just bishop slide back to g5. And actually, this is relatively even. And in fact, you could honestly argue black is better because they have control of this diagonal now. So meaning black's have to waste a tempo trying to push his pawn to a3. This b2 pawn will probably never get pushed. But instead here, Tal plays knight to e5. And this is a big mistake because here after bishop e2, after bishop e2, basically what happens is once you push your bishop here, this is not a good move because now you can just play bishop takes, and you can say, okay, queen takes, but now you play this move f4, and actually you lose the tempo because your queen will have to slide back. And sure, you're going to say, okay, you can't short castle, but after just queen to d3 or even queen d2, you use long castle, and there's no threat because you don't have this file open as you would have if you played the other move, which is e5. So here, Fischer simply pushes the pawn, kicking out the knight. Same thing, Tall pushes this pawn, takes, and now, okay, you're saying, okay, you have the open diagonal now, but you still have this knight guarding this, and in fact, this is just a free pawn. But here, Fischer makes an inaccurate move. He takes here, when in fact the computer likes this move, pawn to e4, or sorry, knight to e4, threatening this bishop, keeping that pressure. And here, actually, I think that just taking with the pawn makes more sense to me because you're going to slide this rook over, and then you can play knight e4. I don't see a big difference between these moves, in my opinion. Here, knight to e4, Tall simply slides his bishop back to e7, queen d4 with ideas of long castling, and you have a queen here, and this pawn is now protected. Rook to a4, big mistake, because now you can sacrifice your knight. And here you play queen takes, queen to c7, long castles, rook takes, king to b1, rook a6, knight takes, sorry, not knight takes, bishop takes pawn, rook to b6, bishop d3, pawn to e5, f takes, rook takes queen. You see, Fischer willingly gives up his own queen. You know why he gives it up? Because after rook takes, this is a very annoying pawn chain now. You can bring this bishop in to take, and if you slide the rook here, it's just going to take emperor mode. There's no way you can go that this won't happen. You're going to have to slide. This rook is trapped. You see? Let's just replay that again. Here, pawn to e5, and here Fischer finds the best move, which is pawn takes. Let me just show this out. This is what happens. Pawn takes, queen to c5, bishop takes, queen to g5, bishop takes g8, queen takes f6, and now you slide the rook to f1, putting pressure on this queen. Computer doesn't like this move. In fact, it thinks that it should have been the d rook that goes here. I, once again, don't see too much of a difference. In fact, I would honestly argue that h2f is stronger simply because you want to get this other rook active and this pawn isn't being threatened. And I would say this rook is doing a relatively good job on the d file already, because this is just only protected by, sure, it's protected two ways, but it's not protected enough, and this is a long-term disadvantage. So rook h to f1, queen takes, bishop takes, f7 check, king e to d8, bishop e6, queen h6, bishop takes d7, bishop takes, rook to f7, queen takes h2, rook takes d7 check. Now, this is very nice, and in fact, you could probably, like, up until here, you could honestly make a case that as a beginner, you could probably be like, oh, well, this just seems like black is winning, but in fact, once you calculate this out, this is just super lost for black, because yeah, you have a queen and a pawn, but you have 1, 2, 3 pawns with the rook pair, and this is just not winnable for black. So they shuffle around for a little bit. Fischer gives these checks, you know, pretty standard endgame stuff, just trying to find your footing. Here, Fischer pushes the pawn to g4, with ideas that if you take this, you're basically going to play a rook to h1, then you have to slide your queen back to d4, and you play rook h7, and this is just significantly better for the for the white pieces. And in fact, you actually have a mate. You play, if black plays queen to g1, you play something like king a2, king g8 check. Here you play b3, then you play queen takes h7, rook takes h7, b4, rook to c7. Then you have two moves. You can either play the king to d8 or f8. I think this is a very nice mate, so I'm just going to go through it. Play queen to f8, pawn to c3. Here, if b takes, you play pawn to b4, and in fact, you don't have to worry about getting here, because as soon as this pawn goes here, you can take either with the rook or just slide your pawn or your king here, with ideas of taking on c1. Here, c2, king b2, Then something like promote to a queen, king takes, king to g8, b5, and here you see you just have this very nice checkmate. But here that obviously doesn't happen. You have queen to h3, pawn to g5, queen to f3, rook e1 check, king f8, rook takes b5, king g7, rook b6, queen g5, sorry, queen g3, rook d1, queen c7, rook d6, queen c8, pawn to b5, king h7, rook a6, and here Tal resigns. He resigns because after you play something like king to g8, you play rook to a7, and now you have the same idea where you just cut off this restriction from the king, so the king can't move. The queen can't really give a check. It could go here, 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 but then after this, there's basically no more checks that black can give. If you get your king on the b2 square, the queen would have to come somewhere here, but obviously can't go here because it's protected by the pawn and the rook. Can't go here because it's protected by the rook, so the queen would have to slide back here, and then you're just going to promote, and the same idea that you're going to sack, and you just promote. So that was one of the, I believe, 13 or 14 games played between Tal and Fischer. Actually, it might be 12, correct me if I'm wrong. But they played a series of games, and actually, I think that their games are just super fun to watch and just play through again because, I mean, they're two tactical players, not really positional players. They are positional, but they're known more for their tactics. And I actually think that the fact that Fischer sacked his queen is just super nice. He sacked his queen against the person known for his sacrifices against all. And actually, this is it's like good chess understanding of how you play the Taimanov against somebody who, even modern day, who might struggle a little bit with the black piece if they play the Taimanov and they don't know what they're doing. You just kind of just see like good ideas of what Fischer and Tall had, and yeah, that's basically it. If you like this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.